What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we are going to be taking a deep dive into all of the main card fights taking place at UFC Fight Night Blaydes versus Lewis. Now this weekend is an absolutely massive card. There's 15 fights on this card, which is huge compared to last week's event, which only had 10 fights. So if you would like to watch breakdown videos for all of the fights on the prelims, which I won't be covering in this video, check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. The reason why I don't cover every single fight on a UFC card on YouTube is because I research fights throughout the week, and if I were to go into as much depth on all the fights on a UFC card as I like to, these breakdown videos would end up being 3 to 4 hours long. I don't have time to record that. It would be absolutely grueling, and I know you guys don't want to be sat there for 3-4 hours just watching one video. So on my website, I break down, my breakdowns for each individual fight in, 5, 10, 15, 20 minute long videos, and then you can watch them at your leisure throughout the week. But in this video, we will be taking a very deep dive into the main card fights from a betting perspective, and hopefully you're going to be able to use the information from this video to make better betting decisions this weekend. It's a big card, boys. It's a very, very big card with some interesting fights. So we are also at the stage of the video where it's time to do a business deal, right, boys? If you want a prop bet live stream this weekend, all you need to do is hit the like button below. Now, I don't think this card is going to be as popular as last week's card. We won't set the target as high. If this video gets 200 likes, boys, a couple hours before UFC Fight Night Blaydes versus Lewis starts, I will jump on the YouTubes and we will try and find a decent value prop bet for every single fight. Now, if you don't know what a prop bet is just basically a highly specific fight, a highly specific bet pertaining to a matchup. So, for example, if we go to the Blaydes versus Lewis fight, Lewis to win by knockout or TKO would be considered a prop bet. That's not a prop I'm recommending, that's just an example. So if you would like a prop bet live stream this week, hit the like button below, and if the video gets 200 likes, we will do it. Also, while you're there, the like button, very, very close to the subscribe button. Please hit that subscribe button for me. If you haven't already, I would love to get to 5,000 subscribers by the summer. You can help me do it, boys. I would really, really, really appreciate it. And earlier on in the video, we were talking about how I only cover the main card fights because I try to keep the length of these videos kind of short and digestible, so they're under an hour, so you can kind of get a strong read on the main event fights from a betting perspective. And then for those that are balls deep on MMA, they can go a little bit deeper and obviously head over to my website for the prelim breakdowns. But one of the reasons why I decided to just start focusing on those main card fights was, like I say, to keep the video length shorter, because the video length in the past used to get crazy. One of the reasons why the video length used to get pretty long is because at the beginning of the video, I always used to talk about my betting performance from the past event. That would often go on for 10, 20, 30 minutes long, which would extend the length of the video. So what I've started doing is every Monday, I now drop a recap video where I go over my performance from the previous week. You can see we've posted one here and we've posted one here this Monday. So if you would like to see how I'm doing in terms of my betting performance, just jump onto my channel and check out some of these videos. I'll be dropping one every Monday because let's be realistic here. You're here for betting advice. You're here for, content that is going to help you get a better read on some of the matchups taking place on the UFC. You want to make sure that the guy you're taking advice from is not the complete dickhead and that he knows what he's talking about. So you could check out these videos, see how I'm doing on a week-to-week basis, and yeah, man, see what you think. But check them out. They're not getting anywhere near as many views as my my live streams or my breakdown videos. I just think it's because people don't know I'm doing them. So check them out, man, and you'll be able to keep up to date on how I'm doing from week to week. And I talk a little bit in the videos as well about how I kind of feel about fights after they've happened, which I know some of you are interested in. So check that out as well. And while you're there, watch this video if you haven't already. That's quite an interesting one as well. But anyway, boys, all that stuff aside, let's now get into the first fight that I want to talk about in today's video, which is going to be Phil Hawes against Nasruddin Imavov. So this is a very, very interesting fight. There's a lot of fights on this card which should be very competitive. A lot of fights where both guys are floating around even money. And I really, really like bets like this, or really like fights like this, because when both guys are floating around this even money odds range, if you could just kind of lean 60-40 one way or the other, you could usually find a strong position to put your money. So if we take a look at the odds on this one, we've currently got Nasruddin Imavov floating around odds of about 2.05, which is plus 105 for an implied probability of 49%. And if we take a look at the odds on Phil Hawes, he's currently the favourite at odds of around 1.83, which is going to be minus 120 for an implied probability of 55%. So in the eyes of the bookies, this is roughly a 50-50 fight. Slightly leaning towards Phil Hawes. Now, I know a lot of people are quite high on Nasruddin Imavov in this fight, but I think it's mainly because there's a little bit of wiki capping going on. Imavov did used to train at the MMA Factory alongside Francis Ngannou. He still trains at the MMA Factory alongside Cyril Gane. And obviously this is a gym with a bit of hype behind it, right? You know, this gym has produced high-level guys like Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou. So naturally, the kind of temptation when you see a fighter coming out of this gym is to rate them very, very highly. And of course, it helps that Imavov has listed his, I guess, nation that he's from is Dagestan. There's always a lot of hype on fighters coming out of Dagestan too, right? So when you look at a guy, like Nasruddin, he's got a decent record. He comes out of a very good gym where he's trained with very good training partners. He's got a great coach, and he's from Dagestan. He's ticking a lot of boxes, right? He's also got a pretty good frame for MMA. He's 6'3" with a 75-inch reach, compared to Phil Hawes, who's only 6 foot tall. It's going to give him a little bit of a size advantage, but we can see that even though Hawes is shorter, he actually has a reach advantage here. So I can see why people are interested in Imavov. But when you look at these guys from a stylistic point of view, this could be a very, very good fight for Phil Hawes. And I'm going to show you some video footage in a little bit that's hopefully going to back up this point and help you guys kind of see it for yourself. So the reason why I personally find this fight a little bit risky from a betting point of view is because I feel like Phil Hawes is going through this stage in his career where he's really improving at a rapid rate and he's evolving into a fighter that could be extremely good. At the moment, because if you look at his record, he's finished so many of his recent opponents so quickly, we don't really know where he's at in his career right now, but it's possible that he could be very, very good. I mean, even if you look at the colours on his record, right, even if we just do a little bit of wiki capping, back in 2015 to 2017, there's lots of red. What I mean? He's taken a lot of losses against pretty average opponents. And then, since 2017, all you see is green, green, green. All he does is win, win, win. You can see a visible shift there. Now, obviously, over the last sort of 2-3 years, he has fought a much lower level of opponent. Julian Marquez, Louis Taylor, and Andrew Sanchez are much tougher stylistic opponents than any of the guys that we've seen Hawes against over the last few years. However, there has been a shift in Phil Hawes' training during this period of time, which could suggest that there's more to this than meets the eye. Because back in 2015, 2016, 2017, we all remember Phil Hawes as being this guy who was going on to The Ultimate Fighter, guy that was entering, the World Series of Fighting with a lot of hype behind him, a guy that was popping up on Dana White's Contender Series with a lot of hype, because he was training at Jackson Wink MMA, and he was the direct training partner of John Jones, and he was very, very hyped up because of that. But as we know, there has been a little bit of I guess kind of like a little bit of an empire falling with Jackson Wink MMA, where for the longest time, Jackson Wink MMA, back in 2015, 2016, 2017, Jackson Wink was regarded as probably the best MMA gym in the world, and you had so many champions coming out of that camp, so many champions that had, for a while trained at that camp and then moved on, guys like George St. Pierre. And they had the reputation for just producing these elite fighters. So just like at the moment where a lot of people are interested in betting Imavov because he comes out of, MMA Factory, which has produced so many great fighters, Phil Hawes kind of had the same hype behind him back then. However, we know that there was a bit of a downfall in Jackson Wink MMA where, for whatever reason, fighters stopped improving when they went to train there. fighters, started to decline when they were training there, and we saw a lot of the high-level guys that built their career train at Jackson Wink MMA jump ship, move on and go somewhere else, and the guys that stuck around kind of stagnated and just didn't perform well. Jackson Wink are in this period at the moment where they're just not producing very high-level fighters, and, when fighters go there, they don't improve. Obviously you've got Holly Holm, and you've got John Jones that have stuck around. They're still performing at a high level, but everyone else has pretty much disappeared. And so, I feel Phil Hawes was training at Jackson Wink MMA during a time where that gym was on its downfall. Since then, Phil Hawes has now moved to train at Sanford MMA. Here we can see him alongside Gilbert Burns. And obviously we know that Sanford MMA is one of the best MMA gyms in the world now. Nothing lasts forever. And where Jackson Wink were top of the game, new gyms like Sanford MMA have kind of taken their crown. I know that Sanford MMA is not really a new gym. It's evolved from the days of the Black Zillions, which is a very old gym, which was around when Jackson Wink was doing the damn thing. But Sanford MMA, one of the best gyms in the world now, established itself as one of the best gyms in the world. And here we can see him with Michael Chandler. And so, when you look at Phil Hawes' record, you can see these losses that he was racking up back in 2016, 2015, 2017 could have been because he wasn't getting the best training and direction at Jackson Wink MMA. But then you see this 2-year break here between, he took almost 2 years off between 2017 and 2019, moved to Sanford MMA. And, in each one of these 5 fights, he finished all 5 opponents in round 1. He's just looked absolutely brilliant. I've been so impressed with Phil Hawes. He looks absolutely excellent. And I'm going to show you a little bit of footage here to hopefully help you understand the reasons why I do think Phil Hawes is an extremely good fighter and why he could give Imavov big trouble this weekend. So one of the reasons why Phil Hawes used to struggle in the past was because he used to come out the gate very aggressive, try to use his wrestling. He's got a base in wrestling. He's a very strong wrestler. He would use his wrestling to kind of take his opponents down, overwhelm him with his athleticism and physicality. We need to pause this because a lot is happening. Overwhelm him with his kind of strength and physicality and athleticism. But then, because he would commit so much energy to his wrestling and grappling, he would invariably burn himself out and then fade into the second and third round. What's really interesting now is that even though Phil Hawes is a grappler and he's got a base in grappling, he's always going to have a base in grappling, he moves extremely well. And he actually looks like a striker. You watch how he pumps this jab out here early in this round. Just pumping that jab out there. Very sharp striking. Just look how he stays behind that jab. Beautiful leg kick there. And obviously, because he's got that base in wrestling, he's now able to use his wrestling in reverse to keep fights on his terms and dictate where fights take place. You see Michael Wilcox shot a really nice takedown there, but Phil Hawes did a great job of clearing his legs, getting his back over to the cage, digging underhooks, and getting his back off the cage. So if you were to play someone footage of Phil Hawes, play this fight to them, they would probably tell you he looks like a striker, right? Moving very well, great jab, beautiful leg kicks, fluid movement, technical. He's good defensively, good head movement. Look at that. He sees that leg kick coming from a mile away and just slips it. So what I'm seeing with Phil Hawes is he's now becoming a complete fighter where he can use the wrestling on his terms. When he was younger in his career, he had to rely on his wrestling to come out, take his opponent down, impose himself on his opponent and use his grappling to really grind them out. But because he's a big, strong, muscular guy, he just didn't have the gas tank to be able to grapple hard for 15 minutes. Whereas now that he's able to use his wrestling in reverse and he's got the striking where he doesn't need to necessarily take guys down, he can pace himself much better, conserve energy much better, and he's now a way more well-rounded fighter, a way more complete fighter. So we'll just watch a couple more minutes of Phil Hawes here so that when we switch to going and watching footage on Imavov, you can really start to appreciate why this may be a pretty tricky fight for Imavov. For me, Phil Hawes is just a more complete fighter. He's more technical. I mean, look at that. Stepped over to the left and threw that right hook out there to catch Michael Wilcox. Flush on the chin. And the problem when you've got a fighter like Phil Hawes, or the problem for his opponents, is because he's one of these guys that's reasonably good everywhere, he doesn't really have many weaknesses that that you can exploit, because his striking is so good offensively and defensively. And if he's putting a lot of pressure on you, or if he's out striking you standing, you can't really take him down to alleviate that pressure, because his takedown defense is so damn good. So the only real way to deal with a guy like Hawes is to try and weather that early storm and hope that he burns himself out. But unfortunately, in order to get him to burn himself out, you usually need to make a guy like this work very hard. And in order to make a guy like this work very hard, you need to put yourself in a lot of danger to basically get in front of him and rough him up a little bit. So that's Phil Hawes. Very, 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 very talented fighter, and looks like he could be very good. Now, if Phil Hawes has cleaned his gas tank up and he's able to perform like we've just seen from him in that first round against Wilcox for 15 minutes, I think this becomes a very, very difficult fight for Imavov. Imavov here is in the blue gloves, and one of the issues with Imavov's style of striking, which you're going to see in this first round, is because he's very long and tall and abnormally big for the division at 6'3", he's quite slow to react to what his opponent is doing, so he's not the best defensively, which is a big issue, because Phil Hawes, you take a look at Phil Hawes' record, he's got enormous power, right? He's an absolute nightmare. His last 5 fights have all ended in round 1. So with Imavov, he's one of these guys that kind of likes to stay on the outside and use his length to chip away at his opponent, but he doesn't really have the striking defense to back it up. And the thing with Hawes is, because he's so athletic, he's so fast, he can cover distance so quickly. Because Imavov's a little bit slow to react to what his opponent's doing, and he fights with his hands low, he is a bit of a sitting duck to that big right hand of Hawes, because when Hawes comes forward, he can cover distance way faster than Imavov can react to it and then try and get out the way. So when you look at this first round against Jonathan Mounier, you could just see that Hawes is one of these guys, or Imavov is just one of these guys that just likes to stand in front of his opponent, use his length to chip away at them, but he's definitely there to be hit. Like, you see him almost hit a flush right-hand counter there from Mounier. And if you go and watch Imavov's UFC debut against Williams, he did get rocked and wobbled, a couple, 2-3 times in that fight, and we know that Hawes is a hell of a lot more dangerous than Williams. So when I look at this fight from a betting perspective, it's really, really difficult for me to feel confident on either side, because we know that Imavov is tough as nails. He's got a great gas tank. He can fight at a high pace for 3 rounds. But we also know that if Phil Hawes shows up with good enough cardio to perform at a good level for 3 rounds, Imavov is going to be second best everywhere and he's screwed. The problem is, in the past, we've seen Phil Hawes gas out in round 1 and then fade very hard in round 2. That might happen again against Imavov. It's inconclusive. We don't have evidence to prove beyond all reasonable doubt that Phil Hawes has cleaned his gas tank up and he's going to be able to perform at a decent level for 3 rounds this weekend. But what I would say is that there's been a notable improvement in him from a technical point of view from the time he was at Jackson Wink to how he is now at Sanford MMA. So if he's improved all of his skills from a technical point of view tenfold, how much other things have he improved which we haven't seen yet because his fights have ended too quickly? Is it possible that if Phil Hawes has dramatically improved his takedown defense and ground game, if it's possible that, or we've seen the Hawes dramatically improved his striking, is it now possible that he's also improved his strength and conditioning as well? I think it is, especially at a gym like Sanford MMA, where they've got tons of big, strong, athletic, muscular dudes that have also got pretty good gas tanks. But it's inconclusive, simply because we haven't seen a lot of Phil Hawes in his last 5 fights. He keeps starching everyone. So yeah, for me, I'm going to pass on this one. I definitely lean towards Hawes because I think he's better than Imavov everywhere, and with Imavov's striking defense not being the best, I think there's a pretty good chance Hawes can land something big and knock him out. But with there being some question marks still over Phil Hawes' gas tank, this one turned out to be an easy pass for me. So I hope you found that useful, boys, and good luck if you decide to bet this fight this weekend. So we now move on to the next one, which is going to be Alexei Oleinik against Chris Daukaus. Now, what did surprise me when I began researching this fight was that a few of the guys on the website kind of said they were thinking of betting Oleinik, which was super interesting to me because I personally felt that this was a very, very, very bad matchup for Oleinik. So I'm probably going to go into more depth on this fight than I'd planned to, just because I didn't realise that people were actually considering betting Oleinik here. So I want to kind of give you guys as much information as possible so you can make the smartest betting decision for you. So if we take a look at the odds on this fight, we can currently see that Daukaus is around about a 1.61 favourite, which is minus 164 for an implied probability of 62%. If we take a look at the odds on Oleinik, he's currently around about 2.40, which is plus 140 for an implied probability of 42%. So for me, I don't really know why people are interested in betting Oleinik here based on past performances. We know the style of fighting that Oleinik has is the same in every single type, every single fight, right? Oleinik tries to utilize the same strategy against all of his opponents. He likes to come forward, blocking punches with his face, head down, and basically windmilling, just tossing that big, powerful overhand right out there to tie his opponent up, get him into the clinch where he can start working for a takedown. The problem with this style, and why that style is likely to get him into a lot of trouble against Chris Daukaus, is that Daukaus is primarily a grappler, but he's got big power in his hands, good boxing, and he's much, much faster than Oleinik. So, when Oleinik comes forward with that style where he literally puts his head down, and he throws those big looping, hooks, particularly that big looping right hook, he's going to be wide open to getting knocked out by Chris Daukaus, because Daukaus is much faster, hits like a truck, and Oleinik's very bad defensively. Oleinik just puts his head down, windmills, maybe keeps his head up hands up like this in the high boxing guard from time to time, but because he's not moving his head, he doesn't really have any footwork, he's not reacting to what his opponent is doing. It is very, very easy to catch Oleinik clean and cold and land big shots on him. So, it's such a bad stylistic matchup for Oleinik, because Oleinik is primarily a grappler, but at this stage in his career, with him being 43 years old, he just doesn't have the athleticism to take guys down anymore. In order to take guys down that have got reasonably good takedown defense, you need to shoot in deep on their legs, deep on their hips, and upset their balance. It's very difficult to do that at 43 years old, for Oleinik when he's got badly injured knees and he stands very flat-footed and stiff. It's especially difficult to do that when you're fighting someone much younger, much faster, much more athletic, and when they've got a base in grappling. If we look at this, Daukaus is 31, Oleinik is 43. That's a 12-year age gap in this fight, and statistically, the younger fighter will win around 70% of the time when there's a 12-year age gap in a fight. So even if you don't know anything about MMA, you don't know anything about how these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, but you understand that statistic, you'll see that it doesn't make sense mathematically to bet Oleinik in this spot, because if we look at the odds on Daukaus, currently floating around 1.61, which is minus 164, the implied probability on Daukaus is 62%, which means if we know the younger fighter wins 70% of the time when there's a 12-year age gap in a fight, straight away you're getting an 8% margin over the bookie, which is a very, very nice margin. Straight away there's a good profit margin there on Daukaus. And so I understand Daukaus is kind of like new into the UFC and he hasn't really proved himself and he's only really got wins against guys no one's ever heard of. And I understand Oleinik's a big name in the division who's got a big win over Verdum, Maurice Green, Mark Hunt, lots of guys that are high profile fighters in the heavyweight division. I understand that from a wiki capping perspective, it can be very, very tempting to just roll the dice and fire off a little bit of money on Oleinik as an underdog bet and hope that he comes through for you. But you'll often hear me say in my videos, when it's very difficult to distinguish who's going to win, you'll often hear me say, this is a dog or pass matchup, right? You bet the underdog, they're going to give you a better risk to reward ratio. I don't feel that's the case here, just because Oleinik's path to victory is really, really limited. He does hit very hard, but he's not the most dangerous stand-in, because he just kind of comes forward spamming the same, left, right, big power hook combos. He's a little bit slow. He also tends to slow down a lot in the second and third round, which makes him a lot less dangerous. Daukaus moves well, hits hard, athletic, fast, good boxer. It's a good stylistic matchup for Chris Daukaus. Obviously, it's a big step up in competition for him, but he has the skills to pass the test with flying colours. So Daukaus is a very, very tempting bet this weekend. It's a good stylistic matchup for him. He should win here. He's younger, faster, stronger, more athletic, and at this stage in their fight, at this stage in their careers, he's probably better than Oleinik everywhere. So I understand why he's the favourite. I get why he's the favourite. I would urge you to do your own research and think carefully about this one if you're thinking of betting Oleinik. I think it's a nightmare matchup for him, and Daukaus should get it done. But let me know what you think in the comments below, boys. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think I'm missing out on any key details here? Let me know, man. Let me know. Leave a comment below. So we now get into the next fight, which is going to be Charles Rosa against Darrick Minner. Now, from a stylistic point of view, Darrick Minner has a pretty good chance of winning this. However, Darrick Minner seems to have some kind of issue with his mentality, which makes it unlikely he's going to win this. Let me explain. If we take a look at the odds on this fight, we can see that Rosa's currently one of the biggest favourites on the card at odds of around 1.54, which is minus 185 for an implied probability of 65%. If we take a look at the odds on Minner, he is currently around about odds of 2.60, which is plus 160 for an implied probability of 38%. So from a stylistic point of view, this matchup could be very close. Minner is a reasonably good grappler and a reasonably good striker. Charles Rosa obviously is primarily a grappler, but he primarily has his base in BJJ. Not the strongest wrestler, doesn't really have any offensive wrestling, and on the ground he really lacks a physicality to his grappling. He's quite weak on the ground. We've seen a lot of guys in the past kind of outmuscle him on the ground, and for that reason I do think Minner can give him some trouble on the ground. Rosa's style of striking is very tricky, is very awkward. He likes to fight in his sideways stance and just fight very long and chip away at his opponent with really awkward kicks. Minner's got much more of a traditional style of kickboxing. However, he is very aggressive, where he just kind of likes to blitz his opponent, and he's not really too focused in spending much time in kickboxing range because he's primarily a grappler too. His striking purely exists just to set up his grappling, so he's not really interested in getting into a kickboxing match. He wants to be on the ground. The problem with Minner is that, earlier on in the video where we were talking about Phil Hawes and Nozadin Imavov, we were saying how Hawes has got himself into the cycle over the 2015, 2016, 2017 period, where he would come out the gate really aggressive in round one, burn through all his energy, and then struggle bad in the second and third round. Minner does exactly the same thing, but it's really weird with Minner. When it comes to Phil Hawes, when you see him into the second and third round, it's very clear that he's slowed down a lot and he's very gassed. Minner doesn't gas out into the second and third round, but it's like he fades mentally and looks for a way out. It's one of those things you should probably see a sports psychologist for, but it's a very, very strange pattern. If we look at his record, we can see that the vast majority of his wins come in round one, right? First round finish there, and it goes back to way before the UFC, right? The majority of his wins are in the first round. But what you notice about Darrick Minner is that if he doesn't get the win in round one, he will look for a way out of the fight. He doesn't gas, but he will look for a way out to quit. I hate that word because I'm the biggest pussy in the world. Darrick Minner's 10 times the man I'll ever be for being brave enough to be an MMA fighter. But the fact is, if he doesn't get an early submission, he usually tries to look for a way out and quit. We can see it there. Fight went into the second round and he lost. Realised he didn't have an advantage over Burns on the ground and he kind of gave up. Fight went into the second round, he lost. Fight went into the second round, he lost. Realised he didn't have an advantage on the ground, got himself submitted. Lost a decision there. So this pattern plays out where Minner comes out the gate very aggressive, tries to submit his opponent early, and if that doesn't pan out for him, he just kind of caves mentally and looks for a way out. Now that's interesting here because Rosa's not particularly dangerous. Rosa doesn't have knockout power. He's not a particularly dangerous submission grappler. He kind of caught Manny Bermudez in an armbar, but it was a little bit dodgy because Rosa hooked his toes in the cage to create more leverage on the armbar. But anyway, if you look through Rosa's MMA record, he's a bit of a decisionator, right? Lots of decisions, not too dangerous. So the thing with Charles Rosa is, even though he's not particularly dangerous, not particularly a physically strong grappler, you know, his striking's not great, he is tough as nails. Rosa's one of these guys with a great gas tank, and he can fight at a high pace for 15 minutes, and he's reasonably good everywhere. So, you know, Rosa's tough as nails. We've seen him take an absolute beating against Shane Burgos and try and hang in there until the very end. He was very annoyed when the referee stopped this fight, but he took lots and lots of damage in that fight and hung in there, man. You know, he took tons of damage, demonstrated a good chin, showed there was no quitting him. We've seen him put in horrendous positions on the ground in his fight against Bryce Mitchell. You know, Bryce Mitchell tied him up and put him in some really, really deep submissions, and Rosa refused to tap. That's notable here because Darrick Minner's submissions are quite nasty. One of the reasons why this guy, you know, fades in round 2 is because he commits so hard to his submissions in round 1 that if he catches his opponent in something, he's got a very, very good chance of submitting them. But Rosa is just the kind of guy that won't tap. Rosa's the kind of guy where you have to put him to sleep to submit him. He's not going to tap, and that does make him quite a tricky opponent for Darrick Minner, which is why I think Rosa deserves to be the favourite here. Now, from a betting point of view, I don't like Rosa so much as a favourite, because where we were talking about Phil Hawes potentially going through a period in his career where he's turning things around now that he's training at Sanford MMA, we could see something similar happen with Darrick Minner. Because like I said earlier on in the video, Darrick Minner's not a bad fighter. From a technical point of view, he's got all the skills he needs to be very competitive against a lot of guys in this division. Minner's problem is his pacing. He commits way too much energy in round 1 to go for a finish, and if he doesn't get it, it bites him in the ass in the second and third round, and he fades. But now he's training under James Krause, seems to be taking his career a lot more seriously. He's at a better gym, he's got a better coach, he's got much better training partners around him, so maybe he's going to start to fight a bit smarter. Maybe James Krause says to him, look Darrick, you know, you've been in this period in your career where you win one, you lose one, you win one, you lose one, and that's because you put all your eggs in one basket, you try and get it done in round 1. Maybe if you spread that output out from round 1 across the 15-minute fight and pace yourself better, you'll have a lot more success. And so that's why I would be nervous about betting Charles Rosa here as a big favourite, because if Darrick Minner comes out and fights like he usually does, Rosa deserves to be a big favourite and he should probably win. But if Darrick Minner decides to pace himself over 3 rounds, from a stylistic point of view, from a technical point of view, I don't think Rosa's that much better than Minner. And so for that reason, the fight could turn out to be pretty competitive. So in terms of who to bet here, you know, I don't see enough from Minner to make this a dog or pass situation. If you really want to bet this fight, I think you do have to go with Charles Rosa, but I wouldn't feel great about betting him as a big favourite. Personally, I think there is a better bet on this fight, and let me show you what I mean. If we take a look at the over-under on this fight, we can see that the under 2.5 rounds on the Rosa versus Minner fight is currently around about an average of 1.61, which is minus 164 for an implied probability of 62%. Now, if we look at Darrick Minner's career, we can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19. 9 fucking teen, boys. 19 of Darrick Minner's last 20 fights. 19 of his last 20 fights. Let me just fucking put that in perspective for you. 19 of his last 20 fights have ended under 2.5 rounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then there was a decision somewhere in the middle. So for me, this looks like a tremendous value bet. A tremendous value bet. You look at the odds on this, 1.61, an implied probability of 62%. The bookies are only giving this a 62% chance of ending under 2.5 rounds, which is mental, which is absolutely mental, because 95% of Darrick Minner's fights over his last 20 fights have ended under 2.5 rounds. So this is insane value to me. Now, from a stylistic point of view, I'll be quite honest with you. I don't like the under. I don't like the under here. I really don't. Charles Rosa's not particularly dangerous standing up, and he's not particularly dangerous on the ground. But what I will say is Darrick Minner fades mentally, and he looks for a way out of a fight in the second and third round if he doesn't get a finish in the first. So where we were talking about, Chris Daukaus and Alexei Oleinik, and we were saying, look, when there's a 12-year age gap in a fight, the younger fighter wins 70% of the time. So why the fuck would you ever want to bet Alexei Oleinik? We can play the numbers here as well, and we can say, okay, look, from a stylistic point of view, this fight is unlikely to end inside the distance. However, 19 of Darrick Minner's 20 fights, 19 of his last 20 have ended inside the distance. So why not just play the numbers here and make life easy for ourselves? Like I say, from a stylistic point of view, Rosa's not that dangerous. But he might not be if Darrick Minner doesn't want to be in there anymore and he looks to give a finish to Rosa. What I will say is that Charles Rosa has been very, very open about his financial difficulties. If we take a look at his record, dating back to 2016, he's only fought 5 times since 2016. So he's only had 5 paydays from the UFC in the last 5 years. We know that after training fees, after training camp fees, food, taxes, Charles Rosa ain't making dick from his last 5 fights in the UFC. 1 fight a year, he ain't earned peanuts. This guy's going to be struggling for money. So to supplement his income, we know that Charles Rosa actually works as a chef in Florida to try and, supplement that money that he earns from the UFC. He's been very open about the fact that the last few years have been very difficult for him financially. And so I'm very sure that a $50,000 bonus for finishing Darrick Minner impressively would help a guy like Charles Rosa out a lot. Charles Rosa showed a massive improvement in his last fight against Kevin Aguilar. And so, needing money, being motivated, showing signs of improvement, in his last fight, I'm very, very sure that maybe Rosa will look a little bit more dangerous than maybe he has in the past, and maybe have a little bit more impetus, a little bit more drive, a little bit more motivation to get a finish here. Hopefully that should lead to the undercashing. Like I say, boys, I am not your guru. I'm not going to tell you what to do. At the end of the day, you're a grown-ass man. Do your own research and make a decision for yourself. But let me know what you think, man. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. Leave a fucking comment below. Hit that like button. Let's get this prop video going. And check out my website, MMABettingTips.com, boys. You get any value out of these videos at all, you get a lot more value from my website. Lab bets, live streams, motherfucking breakdown videos for the prelim fights. Check it out, man. Check it out. But anyway, we now get into the co-main event. Vieira against Yana Kunitskaya. Here we go, boys. Here we go. I don't know why I said Yana Kunitskaya in a Japanese accent, because she's Russian as fuck. But anyway, Vieira against Yana Kunitskaya. Very, very strange co-main event this. When I saw that both these girls were put into the co-main, didn't really make any sense to me, just because I don't feel like either of these girls really has that much hype or momentum. Kunitskaya is really, only she's not on a winning streak, right? She's only just beat Julia Stoliarenko, who's a really low level fighter, and Vieira is not on a winning streak either. She recently lost against Irene Aldana. So when I saw these two girls were fighting in the co-main event, it was a little bit strange to me. I then worked out that obviously in 2 weeks' time, Amanda Nunes is fighting Megan Anderson for the featherweight title, and so I would imagine once Nunes is done with that fight, if she wins, she's going to be looking to defend her bantamweight title. So with no obvious contender in the bantamweight division at the moment, because obviously we saw Nunes starch Holly Holm pretty recently, and which means it's unlikely Holly Holm gets another title shot after her win over Irene Aldana. The UFC are probably looking for some fresh blood in the bantamweight division. So that's the only reason why I can think they would make this fight between Vieira and Kunitskaya, because both these girls are probably fresh meat for Amanda Nunes to dispose of. And you know, it is what it is. It's a weird fight to have as a co-main event, but let's fucking get into it. So, Ketlen Vieira against Yana Kunitskaya. Earlier on, we were saying that Oleinik's got a very predictable style of fighting, where he just likes to come forward, drive his opponent into the cage, and work for a takedown, where he fishes for takedowns above hip height. Kunitskaya's got a very predictable style of fighting as well. She doesn't really have any kickboxing, really. She certainly has no boxing. Her style of striking is a very kicks-based style of striking, where she looks to just chip away at her opponent with kicks. Doesn't really have any boxing, not particularly good defensively. But Kunitskaya's style of fighting is to basically drive her opponent into the cage and just chip away at them in the clinch and just try and wear on them. She doesn't do anything else. Doesn't really have any wrestling. She's quite weak off her back. Not dangerous standing. Her tactic is literally wall and stall. She just likes to hold her opponent against the cage and hope to grind out a decision with that very one-dimensional style. That's an incredibly difficult style to be effective with in MMA, because we know that, you know, when the scoring criteria got changed in MMA back in 2016, cage control then became a 50-50 position, where in the past, octagon control and cage control would be a key component of the scoring criteria, where the fighter who had their back on the cage would be the fighter losing that position. But now we know it's a 50-50 position, so the person that wins that cage control position is the person that does more damage and, you know, lands more strikes. To be fair to Kunitskaya, even though she only holds her opponents against the cage, she is very busy in that position. She's constantly throwing knees and short punches. Could take a little bit of a leaf out of, you know, Kamaru Usman's book and chuck some foot stomps out there. Why not? But her style is very, very one-dimensional and quite ineffective, because judges don't really care about cage control that much anymore since the scoring criteria changed, or at least they shouldn't care about it very much. Ketlen Vieira trains at Nova União, very, very well-rounded, you know, difficult to take down, difficult to hold down, you know, strong everywhere, really, very good boxer, and this is a great stylistic matchup for her. She should be able to box Kunitskaya's face-off standing. You know, it should be a very, very comfortable fight for Ketlen, because she has a huge advantage when it comes to boxing over Kunitskaya. Kunitskaya is quite bad defensively, and Kunitskaya's kind of choppy kicks are not really going to bother Vieira. But I also actually think Vieira is going to have a big advantage on the ground. One of Kunitskaya's biggest weaknesses is that her takedown defense isn't great, and she's quite weak off her back. Vieira likes to mix things up with her striking and grappling, and she's got well-timed trip takedowns off body locks, which I think are going to cause Kunitskaya big trouble. One of the reasons why Vieira's offensive wrestling is so successful is because girls don't expect her to try and take them down. Her boxing is so good, she throws such a high volume of strikes, she fights at such a high pace, that she often catches girls cold and off guard when she shoots a takedown, because they're so focused on her boxing. Unfortunately, Vieira's advantages in this fight are represented by her odds, and she is one of the biggest favourites on the card. We can see her current average odds floating around about 1.36, which is minus 279 for an implied probability of 74%. So Vieira has the advantage everywhere. She should win easily, but her odds reflect that. I mean, you really have to ask yourself, do you want to bet on someone like Vieira as such a big favourite? I can tell you the chances of Kunitskaya winning this are very slim. You know, so it's up to you. Again, usually, you know me, I like to use the expression dog or pass a lot. But similarly with the Daukaus versus Oleinik matchup, I don't see this as dog or pass. Just because, just like with Daukaus Oleinik, I do see the favourite in Vieira as being a bad stylistic matchup for Kunitskaya. And Kunitskaya's path to victory is very, very slim. I've got no problem, you know, taking gambles on big underdogs. I've made a lot of money betting big underdogs this month. I've made a lot of money betting Clay Guida. I've bet a lot of money betting Su Wong Choi. However, I need to see the underdog with a clear and obvious path to victory. And if I don't see that clear and obvious path to victory, I'm not just going to blindly throw money at it, because all those small losses can add up over a long period of time. So this one's an easy pass for me. I'm not interested in Vieira as a big favourite, but, you know, I don't see enough from Kunitskaya to want to take a shot on her either. So we now get into the main event. Curtis Blaydes against Derek Lewis. Hopefully you're enjoying this video so far. If you are, please hit the like button. It would mean a lot to me. And subscribe if you haven't already. So let's talk about Curtis Blaydes versus Derek Lewis. So throughout this video, we've been talking about heavy favourites like Chris Daukaus and Vieira, where you may be tempted to roll the dice on the big underdog here, but I would strongly advise you not to do that. Guys, I am a guy that loves to go dog or pass, right? You know, this month, like I say, we've made good money betting big underdogs like Clay Guida and Sung Woo Choi in situations where it was clear it had to be dog or pass. However, this is not a dog or pass fight, just like Daukaus Oleinik wasn't, just like Kunitskaya Vieira wasn't. This is an extremely tough fight for Derek Lewis, and I only wish the odds were a little bit better on Curtis Blaydes. If we take a look at the odds, we can see Blaydes currently around about an average of 1.25, which is minus 400 for an implied probability of 80%, and the odds on Derek Lewis are 4.25, which is plus 325 for an implied probability of 24%. So to kind of get a really good understanding of why this is such a tough fight for Derek Lewis, and if you're thinking of betting Derek Lewis, I strongly recommend that you go and watch Lewis's fight from back in 2018 against Daniel Cormier, where he got absolutely ragdolled, mauled, wet blanketed and dominated for the entire duration of that fight. Now, I know Daniel Cormier is one of the greatest fighters of all time, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. However, I personally believe that Curtis Blaydes is a much more difficult stylistic matchup for Derek Lewis than Daniel Cormier was. And now I know a lot of people are going to be rushing to the comment section to call me a clueless idiot because Daniel Cormier's achieved a hell of a lot more than Curtis Blaydes has in his career. But remember, styles make fights. And from a stylistic point of view, this is a nightmare matchup for Derek Lewis. When Derek Lewis fought Daniel Cormier, yes, he was fighting a very high-level wrestler, but we know Cormier is very, very small for the heavyweight division. So that's one advantage Lewis had going into that matchup. He was much bigger than Daniel Cormier. And we know when small guys like Daniel Cormier try to take big guys like Derek Lewis down, they often struggle to hold them down because the bigger guy's physicality makes it much easier for them to work their way back up to their feet. That's what makes this such a difficult fight for Derek Lewis, because Curtis Blaydes is absolutely huge at 6'4". He's got nice long arms which he can use to get that body lock position and control Derek Lewis. And his size, his weight, the length of his torso, the length of his legs are going to make it much easier for him to create the leverage he needs to hold Derek Lewis down and put him in some really, really bad positions on the ground. So I understand on paper Daniel Cormier is a better fighter than Curtis Blaydes, and he's had an illustrious career. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. But from a stylistic point of view, this is a much tougher fight for Derek Lewis, because Curtis Blaydes is much bigger than DC, and he can use his size and his physicality to just overwhelm Derek Lewis on the ground. So the main reason why this is such a bad fight for Derek Lewis is because Curtis Blaydes is one of these guys that can just relentlessly shoot takedowns and keep coming, right, for 5 rounds. Derek Lewis is one of these guys that does give up takedowns very easily, so Curtis Blaydes is unlikely to have to work very hard for these takedowns. And we can see that, you know, Derek Lewis's takedown offense is very, very bad at just 52%. I personally believe, even including Daniel Cormier, that Curtis Blaydes is the best offensive wrestler in the heavyweight division. He's got great drive on his, you know, deep single, double leg takedowns that he likes to shoot. He's very fast. He's very athletic. He can cover distance very quickly. And like I say, those big, long 80-inch arms enable him to just get to the body lock, wear on his opponent, and, you know, control him and cause him big problems on the ground. Lewis, very bad takedown offense, very weak off his back, and a very low level. Blaydes should absolutely maul him on the ground. So I know that many people will be tempted to take a gamble on Derek Lewis this weekend because of his big power, right? He's very, very dangerous. So the rationale behind betting Lewis will be, well, you know, Curtis Blaydes will have an advantage on the ground, but we've seen Blaydes get rocked, dropped, wobbled, knocked out many times in the past. We know that Blaydes isn't the best defensively. Lewis hits like a truck. Therefore, I'm going to roll the dice on Lewis on the hope that Lewis can land something big and knock Curtis Blaydes out. Now, that's always a possibility, right? Especially in the heavyweight division, where every single fighter in the heavyweight division is a big dude, heavy-handed. You know, most guys in the heavyweight division have got the power in their hands to KO any other heavyweight. But when we look at betting on MMA, we've really got to consider what is the most likely outcome. We've got to be betting on likely outcomes. We know that anything is possible, but we don't want to be betting on pie in the sky, anything is possible outcomes. We want to be betting on outcomes that are likely to happen. And because of how these guys match up from a stylistic point of view, I don't think it's that likely that Derek Lewis knocks Curtis Blaydes out. This is because Derek Lewis doesn't react to what his opponent is doing. So Derek Lewis is one of these guys that is dangerous when he's blitzing forward. And what I mean by that is he's taking control of the center of the octagon and he's coming forward either throwing his flying knees or his big looping power hooks. That's when Lewis is at his most dangerous. But when Lewis does that, he's not reading his opponent. He's not reacting to what they're doing. He's looking at his target in front of him and he's launching, you know, a big flying knee or a big right hook at wherever their head is, wherever his target is. Lewis is not a guy that reacts to what his opponent is doing. So on the Fight Research live stream for this fight, we used Masvidal and Askren, the Masvidal versus Askren fight as an example, because someone said, you know, maybe Lewis catches Blaydes with a flying knee, you know, when Blaydes shoots a takedown. So that outcome is pretty unlikely, because Lewis doesn't react to what his opponent's doing. He doesn't read what his opponent's doing. If you look at the fight between Masvidal and Askren, as Askren came out across the cage and shot that takedown, Masvidal read Askren's takedown entry and threw that flying knee to react to what Askren was doing and to counter him. Lewis doesn't have that style. He doesn't react to what his opponent is doing. When he's on the back foot, when he's in a counter-striking posture, he's not looking to react to what his opponent's doing. He's looking to gain respect in there just by tossing big power strikes out there, but he is not looking to counter. He doesn't read his opponent that well. That's not what he does. When you look at Derek Lewis, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to catch Blaydes, because Blaydes likes to fight in a range where he's either all the way out of a position where he can be hit or all the way inside working for a takedown. Guys that will cause Curtis Blaydes a problem are guys that are going to try and read what he's doing and punish him with a counter or react to what he's doing. So if you think about like a guy like Jairzinho Rosenstrike, right? When you come forward and attack Jairzinho Rosenstrike, he's a very high-level striker that's looking to download all the information you're giving him when you come forward, and he's looking to time you with a counter. Lewis doesn't do that. When you come forward on Lewis, he doesn't know what you're going to do because he can't read his opponent as well as a high-level striker. And so he's kind of a little bit vulnerable and in limbo where he just isn't that dangerous. Lewis is dangerous when you allow him to be the aggressor, you allow him to come forward and attack you with his blitzing attacks, and you show him respect. If you don't show him respect, if you put him on the back foot, which Blaydes will look to do by spamming takedowns, Lewis just isn't that dangerous. So 100% I agree with you. Lewis could catch Blaydes with something big, but it's just not a very likely outcome. Very, very realistic matchup for Blaydes. I'm not saying Lewis can't knock him out. I'm just saying it's not very likely. So hope that makes sense to you guys. I think Blaydes is going to take Lewis to Suplex City and absolutely dominate this fight. Don't give Lewis much of a chance here. You know, do your own research. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people like Lewis by KO, bro. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people call me a dumbass if Lewis does flash KO Blaydes. But remember what I say, guys. Bet on likely outcomes. Look to bet on things that are very likely to happen. Don't bet on things which are not likely to happen. We love MMA. It's a chaotic sport. We absolutely love it because anything can happen, right? It's chaos. But you don't want to bet on anything happening. You want to bet on what's likely to happen. What's likely to happen is Blaydes going to take this guy to Suplex City and dominate. So I hope you enjoyed that video, guys. Please hit the like button if you liked this video, if you found any of this information useful. Check out my website, MMABettingTips.com, and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you very much, boys. Take care, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great week, boys. I hope you crush it.